I'm Mark Roach. This is Transcendent. This is chapter 5 of the novel, The Stranger. The morning arrived with unusual clarity, as if the previous day's gray mist had been swept away by some cosmic broom, leaving the air crystalline and charged with possibility. Maya woke to find sunlight streaming through her window in perfect geometric patterns, the shadows of her fire escape creating a natural mandala on her bedroom wall. She lay still for a moment, watching the light shift and dance, before remembering the stranger's challenge. Follow a sign, see where it leads. Her sign came in the form of an origami crane sitting on her windowsill. Not the one from the street corner, but a new one, folded from paper that seemed to shimmer with morning light. Tucked beneath its wing was a small note written in elegant script. 127 Elm Street, breakfast at 8 a.m. Come hungry for more than food. Maya checked her phone. 7:15 a.m. She dressed quickly, grabbed her guitar and brass box containing the iridescent feather, and stepped into the morning air. The address led her away from the familiar territory of downtown into a residential neighborhood she'd never explored. Tree-lined streets with Victorian houses that somehow survived the city's rush towards steel and glass modernization. 127 Elm Street turned out to be a modest two-story house painted sage green with a wraparound porch where wind chimes created gentle music in the morning breeze. The front yard was a masterpiece of controlled wildness. Native plants and flowering shrubs arranged with the kind of attention that suggested the gardener understood something profound about the relationship between order and chaos. Maya hesitated at the front gate, suddenly uncertain. The note hadn't been signed. She had no idea who lived there or why she'd been invited, but the stranger had said to trust, to follow signs wherever they led, so she opened the gate and walked up the flagstone path. Before she could knock, the front door opened to reveal an elderly man with kind eyes and silver hair that caught the morning light like spun moonbeams. He wore a cardigan that had seen many seasons and held a ceramic mug that steamed with something that smelled like cinnamon and possibilities. Maya said, as if he'd been expecting her specifically. Maya, he said, as if he'd been expecting her specifically. Right on time. The others are already here. The others? Maya asked, but the man had already stepped aside to welcome her in. The interior of the house felt like stepping into a living storybook. Books lined every wall. But these weren't pristine volumes of a collector. They were worn, loved, filled with bookmarks and marginalia that spoke of minds engaged in ongoing conversations with ideas. Comfortable furniture invited lingering, and everywhere Maya looked, she found small details that suggested this was a place where attention was valued above all else. Hand-thrown pottery, carefully tended plants, artwork that rewarded close examination. But it was the kitchen that took her breath away. It was large and welcoming, with a farm table that could easily seat 8 people, windows that caught the morning light and scattered it like a blessing, and the kind of warmth that comes from decades of shared meals and meaningful conversations. At the table sat Joe, Elena, Leo, and Tariq, each looking surprised and delighted as Maya felt. How did you all, Maya began. Same as you, I imagine, Joe said, holding up an origami crane identical to the one Maya had found. Mysterious invitation, impossible to ignore. The elderly man moved around the kitchen with ease and grace of someone who had been preparing breakfast for beloved guests most of his life. On the stove, eggs sizzled in a cast-iron pan that looked older than any of them. Fresh bread cooled on a cutting board, and the table was already set with mismatched plates that somehow formed in perfect harmony together. Please sit, he said to Maya, gesturing to the empty chair between Leo and Tariq. I'm Samuel, though you can call me grandfather if you prefer. Everyone does eventually. As Maya settled into her chair, she noticed that each place setting included not only the usual plates and silverware, but also a small leather-bound journal and a pen that seemed to glow faintly in the morning light. I don't understand, Elena said, her scientific mind struggling with the variables that didn't add up. How did you know to expect us? Who are you? And how is any of this possible? Well, Grandfather Samuel smiled as he transferred eggs from pan to serving dish, his movements unhurried and precise, the same way sunrise knows to follow night. My dear, some things happen because they're part of a pattern larger than understanding, but not larger than our experience. He brought the eggs to the table along with the bread, fresh butter, jam that looked homemade, and fruit that seemed to have been picked moments before. The spread was simple but perfect, each element chosen with the kind of attention that transformed ordinary food into communion. But first, Grandfather Samuel said, taking his place at the head of the table, let us begin with gratitude, not because it's polite, but because it's practical. Appreciation opens doors that nothing else can unlock. They joined hands around the table, a spontaneous circle of connection for a moment set in silences that felt as nourishing as any food they might share. Maya felt the presence of each person around the table, their hopes and questions, their growing sense of participation in something larger than themselves. Now, Grandfather Samuel said, beginning to serve the eggs, let me tell you about the parable of the three watchers. As he spoke, his voice took on the cadence of someone who had told many stories to many listeners, each telling a gift offered to minds ready to receive it. Long ago, in a land where time moved differently than it does here, there lived three brothers who each claimed to be the most important person in their village. The first brother said, I am memory, and without me, no one would learn from the past or know where they came from. The second brother said, I am future, and without me, no one would have hope or direction or purpose. The third brother said, I am present, and without me, nothing would actually exist. All would either be dead history or empty possibility. Grandfather Samuel passed the bread as he continued, his hands moving in rhythm with his words. Their argument grew so heated that it attracted the attention of an old woman who was known throughout the land for her wisdom. She listened to their claims, then invited each brother to demonstrate his importance by spending one day completely alone, without the influence of his siblings. Maya found herself leaning forward, drawn not just by the story, but by the way Grandfather Samuel seemed to be speaking directly to something inside her that she'd never fully acknowledged. Memory went first. He spent his day in a vast library, surrounded by all the knowledge that had ever been accumulated, every story that had ever been told, every lesson that had ever been learned. But as the hours passed, he grew increasingly agitated. The books felt heavy in his hands. The knowledge seemed dusty and irrelevant. The lessons felt like chains binding him to patterns that no longer served. Elena nodded, almost unconsciously, recognizing something familiar in memory's predicament. Future went next. He spent his day in a tower filled with charts and plans, maps of possibility, and schedules of potential achievements. He could see all the wonderful things that might happen, all the problems that could be solved, all the dreams that could be realized. But the more he looked ahead, the more anxious he became, because he could see all the things that might go wrong, all the opportunities that might be missed, all the ways that hope could be disappointed. Leo shifted in his seat, understanding flashing in his eyes. Finally, Present had his turn. But when he tried to spend the day alone, he discovered something remarkable. He couldn't do it. Every moment he experienced contained traces of memory and echoes of future. He realized that he didn't exist in isolation, but only in relationship, only in dynamic dance between what had been and what might be. Grandfather Samuel paused to take a sip from his mug, giving his listeners time to absorb the implications of Present's discovery. When the three brothers came back together, they found that each had learned something crucial. Memory understood that the past only had meaning when it informed the present moment. Future realized that possibilities only became real through present action. And Present discovered that he wasn't separate from his brothers, but was actually the space where memory and future could meet and create something new. Tariq reached for the jam, but his movement was slower than usual, more deliberate, as if he were practicing being present to the simple act of spreading preserves on bread. The old woman smiled when they shared their discoveries. "Now you understand," she said. "You are not three separate people competing for importance. You are three aspects of one consciousness learning to work together. Memory provides wisdom, future provides direction, and present provides the power to transform both into lived experience." The kitchen fell quiet, except for gentle sounds of shared breakfast, the clink of silverware against plates, the quiet satisfaction of good food enjoyed in good company. Maya could feel the story settling into her consciousness like seeds finding fertile soil. "But what does it mean for us?" Joe asked finally. "In practical terms, in our daily lives?" Well, Grandfather Samuel smiled, and Maya knew something of the stranger's expression in his face, the same depth of understanding tempered by infinite patience in those who are still learning. "It means," Grandfather Samuel said, "that awakening isn't about rejecting your past or obsessing about your future. It's about learning to stand consciously in the present moment with full appreciation for how you got here and a clear intention about where you're going." He reached into his cardigan pocket and withdrew 5 small objects, placing one beside each plate. Maya's was a smooth river stone with natural striations that formed a perfect spiral. The others received similar gifts: a piece of driftwood worn silk smoothed by water, a fossil pressed with the imprint of an ancient fern, a crystal that caught and refracted the morning light, a shell that whispered ocean songs when held to the ear. "These are reminders," Grandfather Samuel explained, "not of what you should remember, but of how to remember with the full engagement of all your senses, with appreciation for both the ancient and immediate, with recognition that every moment contains an eternity if you know how to look." Maya picked up her stone, feels its weight and texture, the way it warmed under her touch. As she held it, she felt a connection, not just to the moment, but to the moments that had shaped this stone. Eons of weather and water, pressure and time converging all in this perfect spiral that now rested in her palm. "There's something else," Elena said slowly. "The way you tell stories, the way this house feels, the way you seem to know us. You're connected to the stranger, aren't you?" Grandfather Samuel's eyes twinkled with the pleasure of being understood. "We're all connected to each other in ways most people never notice. The stranger, as you call him, is someone who has remembered this connection and learned to work with it consciously. I am someone who has spent many years learning to create spaces where that remembering becomes possible for others. Are there others like you? Leo asked. Other houses, other people who are part of whatever this is? Oh, yes, Grandfather Samuel said with evident delight. Many others, teachers and students, guides, seekers, all of us learning together how to be fully alive in a world that often seems designed to keep us asleep. You've taken the first steps into a much larger community than you might imagine. As if summoned by his words, the morning light streamed through the kitchen windows, seemed to intensify, illuminating the faces around the table with golden warmth. Maya felt a sense of homecoming she hadn't experienced since childhood, the recognition of belonging somewhere, of being part of something meaningful and true. The journals, Tariq said, touching the leather-bound book beside his plate, are these for us? For your observations, Grandfather Samuel confirmed, for your questions, for your insights, for your growing understanding of what it means to be awake in the world. Writing helps consciousness recognize itself, helps experiences transform into wisdom. Maya opened her journal to find the first page already inscribed with a single line in the same elegant script as the invitation. Every moment is a doorway, every breath is a choice, every heartbeat is a gift. The others found similar inscriptions in their journals, each one slightly different, but all pointing the same or toward the same essential truth. Consciousness was not a passive experience, but an active practice, a skill that could be developed and refined. Now, Grandfather Samuel said, rising to clear the breakfast dishes, it's time for you to begin the next phase of your education. This afternoon, you'll find your way to a place that exists in the spaces between official reality, a school that teaches subjects no university offers, skills no employer recognizes, but knowledge that every soul requires. Well, how will we find it? Maya asked. Grandfather Samuel gestured toward the window where a small bird had alighted on the sill. It's not an ordinary sparrow, but something more colorful, more aware, a creature that seemed to meet their eyes with intelligence and purpose. Follow these signs, he said simply. Trust the process. Remember that the path appears beneath your feet as you walk, not before it. As they prepared to leave, each person carrying their stone or shell or crystal, their journal, and growing sense of purpose, Grandfather Samuel offered one final gift. Before you go, he said, take a moment to really look at each other, not just your friends and companions, but the consciousness that moves through each of you, the light that makes each face luminous without possibility, the light that makes each face luminous with possibility. This is what awakening looks like. Not a solitary achievement, but a collective recognition. Maya looked around the circle and saw what Grandfather Samuel meant. Joe's face carried the warmth of someone learning to serve with full presence. Elena's eyes sparkled with excitement of discovering that reality was larger and more mysterious than her training had suggested. Leo's expression held the focused attention of an artist learning to see the invisible made visible. Tariq's smile carried the joy of someone finding humor in the deepest truths. And in each face, Maya saw a reflection of her own transformation, the gradual awakening from the dream of separation into the reality of connection, and the illusion of meaninglessness into the recognition of purpose. They left the house on Elm Street carrying more than they had brought, not just the physical tokens and journals, but a deeper understanding of what they were being invited into. This wasn't just personal growth or spiritual development, but participation in the healing consciousness itself, remembering of what it meant to be fully human in a world hungry for authentic presence. The bird from the windowsill preceded them down the street, occasionally pausing on fence posts and traffic signs as if marking a trail only they were meant to follow. Behind them, Grandfather Samuel's house settled back into its quiet watching, ready to welcome the next group of seekers when their time came. The morning had given them breakfast, but more importantly, it had given them context, an understanding that their individual awakenings were part of something much larger, a tapestry of consciousness being rewoven one thread at a time. The school in the shadows awaited, and they were ready to become students of subjects they couldn't yet name, but somehow already knew they needed to learn.